Good afternoon, Mr. Kowalczyk back with another video for Business Math, and today we begin Chapter 8, starting with Section 8-1. Recently in class we've been talking about credit cards, and as we've talked in class, you've found out that credit cards are basically small loans, money that you're borrowing from someone else. With credit cards, that money can be borrowed from a bank or most likely a credit card company. Well, today we're going to continue talking about borrowing money, specifically in the form of loans, to purchase everyday things that people need. And we're going to talk about two different ways to calculate the maturity value for loans. You see, what we have here in front of us are two different sets of formulas. And when we're talking about loans, we've got some good vocabulary that we need to cover. The first type of vocab is principal. Principal is not necessarily the principal of your school. What we're talking about here is the amount of money that you want to borrow, whether it's to buy a new delivery truck or for a repair bill that you need to pay, whatever it is that you need money for, whatever that dollar amount is known as the principal. That's the value of the loan. Then there's the interest rate. The interest rate is a percentage that is calculated to help us figure out exactly how much it's going to cost us to borrow the money. Before, I've talked about renting videos or DVDs and how people don't rent those for free. They have to pay money. It's a rental fee. That's kind of what the interest rate is, but it's going to be shown here as a percentage. In the problems below, we've got 10%, and we've even got 11.75%. They're written out in words, but that's what they are. Life of the loan. When we talk about life of the loan, we're talking about how long you plan on keeping this loan for. Sometimes it can be based on days, and that's what we're really looking at today in our problem. 45 days in this problem, or 31 days in this problem. So how long are you going to borrow the money for? 45 days, 31 days. I know that when people usually buy a car, for their own personal use, they might take out a loan for 6 years. But for our problems today, we're just going to be looking at days. How long are you going to be borrowing that money for? And then, in order to find the ordinary interest owed, this is, in other words, that rental fee we're talking about once again, that you need the interest rate for. And so, if we're going to figure out how much money we're going to have to pay the bank for borrowing their money, that fee, that's the ordinary interest owed. In order to do that, we're going to need to know one last thing, and that's the type of days that we're using. Are we using ordinary days? And if we are, it will always be 360. Or are we using exact days? And if we're using exact days, it's always going to be 365. So, what you will find is that when you read the problems, you can get all of this info from the problem. But you're always going to divide it by either the ordinary days or the exact days. The last thing that we'll look at is how to calculate the maturity value, which is step 2. How to calculate the maturity value in step 2. You take that principal that you used before and you add it to either the ordinary interest owed or you add it to the exact interest owed. And as you can see below, we have two different example problems for us to go over. So let's get right to work so you can see how this is done. Because once again, what we're trying to figure out is not how much money we're borrowing, but how much money we're borrowing plus how much money it's going to cost us to borrow that money. So with that being said, let's get rocking with number 1. Number 1, Veronica borrowed $21,000 for a new delivery truck for her shipping business. The bank granted her a single payment of that $21,000. They say it's the same thing, $21,000, but they did it for 45 days at an ordinary interest rate of 10%. What is the maturity value of her loan? Well, we're going to use both steps here, folks. Step 1, what is the principal? The principal, again, is the amount of money that is being borrowed. And in this case, it's $21,000. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it times the interest rate. The interest rate is 10%. But if you move the decimal over and you scoot it over 2 places, it becomes 0.10. Oops, let's keep it that light blue color. I like that. Okay, and we're going to multiply that times the number of days of the loan, which is 45. And the last thing we're going to have to do is divide by 360. By 360, and we see that from the formula up above. So, with that being said, we take out our calculator and we start doing some math. We take 21,000 times 0.10 times 45, divide it by 360, and what we get is 262.5. Honestly, folks, yes, that's what you get in your calculator, but go ahead, make it look like money, because that's what it is. It's money. This is how much money it's going to cost to borrow that $21,000. So, now what we'll do is we'll take that $21,000 and we're going to add it. That's right, add it to that $262.50. And, of course, you get $21,262.50. And we can write that up here on the line. So there's our answer. Now, the reason why we used 360, and I hope people notice this, the reason why we used 360 right here is because it's ordinary interest. Because it's ordinary interest. So what we did was we used this set of formulas. Whenever you have ordinary interest, you use these formulas. Whenever you have exact interest, you're going to use these formulas. So you've got to be aware of that. You've got to be aware of that. And so, let's look at exact interest and knock this one out real quick as well. Nick obtained a single payment loan for $3,225 to pay a repair bill. He agreed to repay the loan in 31 days for an exact interest rate of 11.75%. What's the maturity value of this loan? So we're going to use over here on the right side of our screen the exact interest formulas. So there's two steps for that. Step one, what is the principal? In this case, it's $3,225. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that times the interest rate. Well, when you look at it, it's 11.75%. But we don't like working with percentages, so let's move the decimal over twice to the left. And when you do that, it becomes 0.1175. We're going to multiply it times however long we're borrowing the money, which is 31 days. And then lastly, we divide it by the exact days. Once again, the exact days. So we have got our formula all organized and set up. We've written it out because we've got to show our work. And then we work out the problem. And when you do that, you get, you get that big number. And just to be safe, I'm going to really quick redo my math just to be safe. Yep, that's exactly it. But we got to make that look like money. So let's just go ahead and make it 32.18. Well, now we can do step 2. Step 2 has us add that 32.18 to the 3,225 that we originally had as our principal. So we've got to add those both together. And we get $3,257.18. Pull that box a little bit. And let's write the final answer on the line. So, there you go, folks. Both of these sets of formulas are very similar. The ordinary is very similar to the exact. You just have to be sure that you're always using the correct set of formulas in order to get the correct answers. Don't forget to show your work, and don't forget to write your final answers on the lines provided. Hopefully you have found this video helpful. If you need to, don't forget to ask questions or rewatch certain sections of this video. Thanks so much and have a great day.